Hi,
Yay. Hi.
how's it
Good to see
going?
you.
Yeah,
It's going.
yeah,
I'm glad we're
definitely, it's
doing the
going.
live.
Hmm.
Um, Now that we have officially connected, I'll do the official intro. Um, Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's episode of Me Too Many Voices and Friends for the Community by the Community. I am joined by Patrice from the popular Instagram and Facebook communities, Survivors of Color. Is one of my favorite pages. And Patrice and I actually did another of these Instagram lives back in August of last year, talking about coercion and consent. And you can check that out on my IGTV as well, in case you missed it or just want a recap. But today we are going to be talking about learning to love and trust yourself after trauma. Something really, really important and good lessons to learn.
It is.
I'll go
It
ahead and
is.
pass it off to you.
Yeah, so I felt like it was like necessary to have this conversation because it's something that I think that we all are struggling with. I mean, I know at least I am. It's it's a long journey to, find like to get to that place where you are like learning to like love yourself again and trust yourself again. And I think a lot of us don't realize that, we all are worthy of being of we all are worthy and deserving of, being loved and, being respected. And I think that it's kind of also important to know that, learning to love yourself doesn't happen overnight. It might take years. It might take, your entire life to even get to that point. Hopefully you do, which, because that's a great, I can imagine it's a great experience. And, I think it's even more, I think it's challenging, like learning to love yourself when you've like experienced, some kind of traumatic event. And even when you've experienced like a situation when someone is making you feel that you're unlovable and unworthy. And, because sometimes people can make you feel, pretty bad about yourself. And I think, at least from my experience, it kind of affects your confidence. And also, I feel like it also kind of questions like your self worth, if that makes sense.
I think so.
And like that's not a good feeling to it's really not. And I think I think one of the good things about like getting to the point of loving yourself is it kind of I feel like it takes care of like that fear of not being of that fear of you not feeling good enough for anybody or just anything.
Feeds into
And
that cycle.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think like just from my experience, with that relationship I was in, I felt like I was always um what's the word? I feel like I was always like talked down upon, or I felt like, and it was kind of like just like little like microaggressions. I guess you can say that's the best way to put it, because it wasn't always like just straightforward. It was always like microaggressions or just like little how do you say little hints or just little things that just kind of like made me feel some kind of way. But and it's funny because at the moment I didn't realize how badly it was affecting me until I got out of that situation. I was like, well, shit. Like like they really did hurt my feelings. Like do I really feel that way about myself? So I think that's like something that I'm personally trying to work on is building that confidence back and building like that trust with myself to be able to trust other people. Like even when people say, positive things about me, like I'm learning to be able to like take that, take that compliment and not like, overthink it. Because somebody will say something nice, you're just
Are
like, I don't, are they just saying that? Are they being like honest? Are they just trying to mess with me? So I think for me, like it's so important to try to get to that point where you're at least trying to start that process of like healing. Because like one thing you always say is like, healing isn't linear. You know what I mean? I think that's something that a lot of people should like you have to kind of keep reminding yourself that because you think it's going to be one straight road and there's always going to be like ups and downs. Like you're always going to have like that bad like you're always gonna have like those bad moments. I think it's important to kind of like try to find ways to pick yourself up when you do experience those bad moments.
Yeah, and they don't negate the good moments and the progress that you've made.
Hmm.
Um, truthfully, I spent a lot of this morning crying. Today's a rough day for me.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
days they happen, and we're allowed to feel what we feel.
Hmm.
And it's all, like you said, it's all part of the process.
It is.
And it, it isn't linear, and it's about those little moments
Hmm.
of, healing and maybe saying, wow, I accepted that compliment,
Yeah.
that's a victory.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I think like how do I say this? I think that when it comes to like just like because I'm always talking about like practicing self care and stuff like that because I feel like from what I'm learning is that that's been helpful for me because like when we were talking yesterday when I was telling you that a year ago from today I don't feel the same way about myself that well kind of sort of but I feel better about myself now than I did a year ago. You know, I find myself being able to kind of speak more positivity into my, within myself and about myself. And there's a woman I met through here. Her name is Astrid Ferguson, and she's a life coach. And I remember doing like a panel with her, and I remember I was saying, I don't like the sound of my voice, and I remember telling her, I'm trying to, force myself to do things that make me uncomfortable. She was like, you have to kind of she was like, how can you replace the word force with something positive? And I was like, well, I guess I can say I'm trying to encourage myself to, step out of my comfort zone and to accept new experiences, and I think from there it's kind of like allowed me to try to, every day try to speak something positive about myself. Well, and it's not always out loud, sometimes just like to myself in my head, you know, and I think that's kind of been like very helpful for me. So,
That's huge. I actually wrote this down because I loved it so much. I think it's your last post that you made on your page was the way you speak to and about yourself
hmm,
makes all the difference.
it does.
It was like, I wish I could like that more than once. It's like, yes.
Yeah, it does make a difference. It really does because I feel like it's kind of like what you said. The energy you put into yourself. That's what kind of it kind of affects everything else. It really does. And I feel like the more positive, I guess the more positive I try to think about things, I feel like the more positive things come with it. And like I said yesterday, I don't. I got to the point where I kind of got tired of feeling like sorry or feeling bad about myself for what I've experienced. Because yes, it's something I'm never going to be able to get over. I would love to, but it's always going to be here. It's never going to go away. I'm always going to have. I think about it every day. I don't choose to, but it's just there. Like it could be like the most randomest moment, and I just think about it. Or be something that reminds me of that person. I don't want it to, but it does. And it's not like a sad feeling. It's more of like irritated or an upsetting kind of feeling. You know what I mean? Because I'm thinking, I'm still trying to work on not blaming myself for certain things. And it's not necessarily like the sexual assault part. It's more so of like just like the smaller incidents, the smaller, experiences that I think that I'm still trying to like work through.
Yeah. And I certainly don't want to overstep, but it was something you said earlier and just saying now, and someone actually also made a comment on it as well. I was going to go back, but, like that they were like just microaggressions or smaller things. Those things have a huge impact too.
They do.
Someone wrote microaggressions can also feel so much easier to dismiss when in reality they hurt just as much and just as bad. Absolutely. I
Hmm.
mean, toxic behavior, abuse is abuse and it's going to have an impact. There's no one there with like a clipboard saying, okay, well, it was defined as this, so you're going to be impacted like this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're in this column. And I, I see that so much, even, with myself and
Yeah.
other people that I work with. I just think that it's important to address that that's part of it, and I hope that didn't come across like I was correcting you or anything.
Oh no,
As I
no,
say, I
not at
never would
all.
want to. It just, those things matter.
Yeah,
And they're, I just think they matter.
they do, and it's like sometimes you don't realize, how much those things affect you until it's like I said, until you're no longer like experiencing it.
Exactly, because you're just trying to survive it,
Yeah, exactly. 'Cause at the time, it was like I would I wouldn't like let it bother me. I'll be like whatever. I'll always have some kind of like comeback. Like whenever there's an argument, I'm always the person to, I had no problem, defending myself with the words, but it's just it's the afterthought of just thinking about those conversations, and I'm like, this person really said that to me, and I just, didn't, I kind of just let it happen. And I think that's part of just wanting to like not escalate the situation,
Yeah.
you know. And it's like I don't want to. I hate. I don't. I feel like it's giving him credit, but I don't want to give him credit. But I feel like my experiences with him has kind of like allowed me to be more assertive. Like it's kind of allowed me to set boundaries and actually stick to them. And it's kind of allowed me to like, I'm more like not being afraid to, be myself and not being afraid to, how do I say this? And not being afraid to just, I guess, just do anything without, having to, worry about what another person thinks. Because even like just like with having to experience like the gaslighting and just like even if you don't want to, feed into those words, you have to, it was one of those things where if I don't respond, then if I didn't respond, he would just keep going until I got to the point where I was like, fuck it, I'm about to respond, I'm about to hurt your feelings like you're hurting mine. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of like also taught me to not argue. I try not to argue like I would have at that moment. You know what I mean? Because I think that's another thing about me trying to. What I'm learning about myself is that I don't like the way I feel afterwards. So I try to, how do I say that? I try to like, I don't want to say it wrong.
I don't think you
Like,
could.
yeah. So I guess I just try not to argue. I guess that's like the most simplest way to put it. Like even just like if somebody comments something negative, like in general, I just kind of like, it's kind of like you're entitled to your opinion, but that's about it. Like, even though I disagree, like, but you're entitled to your opinion, and that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. What you think and need and want matters, you
Yeah.
know?
Exactly. And I think another thing about like with loving yourself is kind of reminding yourself that like even though like whatever you experienced, it wasn't your fault because you didn't choose for that to happen to you. That happened to you because that person chose to do that. Like they're the ones who made that decision. They're the ones who decided to overstep those boundaries. They're the ones who decided to, basically just think about themselves in that moment or even those moments, all those moments. And I think even with me, like just trying not to, once again, trying not to blame myself for little things, especially like when it comes to like, it's thinking about those red flags and choosing to ignore them. Because for me, I hate to say this, but for me, like the first red flag was like the first date, and for me, I chose to ignore that, and that's something that I'm still working on. Because if I would have just been like cut ties right there, I feel like it would have saved me from a lot of like pain or like hurt or just what I'm experiencing now or what I've been experiencing for the past maybe like um, six, 6.5, 7 years. I think, yeah, maybe six, like, no, 7 years. And I think that's something that I'm still trying to work on because it's like you know, if I would have left right in that moment, I think it would have kind of, well, definitely, I think it would have changed, the course. And I think with my journey of trying to love myself is just, basically learning to trust my instincts and learning to not even question them because I even like one of my sisters, she was saying, I trusted my gut for the first time, and it ended up, being the right decision. So I think with loving yourself, that's the biggest thing, is trusting that inner voice, because it's never wrong, even though you want it to be wrong, but it's never wrong. And I find myself, when I do trust my gut, I end up being, like when I try to how do I say this? When I end up listening, when I do just like listen to that inner voice, it ends up being correct every single time. So if I have a certain instinct about somebody, I end up being proven. I'm never proven wrong when it comes to, like, you know, um, my opinions towards a person, because I feel like, I don't know if you're like that, but after you've experienced certain things, you're able to kind of like read people better, like their body language and just the little, what they're saying in their, in the words, but what they're not saying. I think it's been easier to kind of spot like somebody's like bullshit, or just somebody's like red flags. And I think that's something that has been like quite helpful for me, and it's kind of helped me kind of like weed out all the people, or you know what I mean? Yeah.
Get them out of there.
And you're never you don't end up being wrong, because it's like, I've seen that before, and it definitely helps with that.
And I think that in itself gives it, is this going this house go talking about cycles, like the healthy cycle of the more you listen to yourself and see that you can trust yourself, that feeds into the confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And someone wrote in, yes, that small voice within, absolutely. And thinking about what you said about, the red flags and stuff, how, yes, trusting ourselves and our instincts are so important, but that it is never okay for anybody to hurt you. There's a reason why we sometimes ignore red flags, and those are important too, and just, we're allowed to like people and to want to give people a second chance and think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, maybe if I get to know them better, we're humans.
Those are my thoughts.
It's so, but yes, absolutely. Trusting yourself and recognizing, danger cues, and recognizing when something doesn't feel right. Those, I don't know if it's because of our conversation yesterday, but I've been thinking about Spider-Man a lot. About our spider senses,
Yeah, exactly.
But does anyone have any questions, thoughts? Here we are, just gathered away. I'm glad that you all are here. I'm just having a good time talking to Patrice. Someone wrote, I think abuse often means undermining someone's institution or instinct. Oh, something is wrong. Absolutely. There's so much gaslighting and purposeful misleading and different masks that people wear that makes it all much more confusing, especially when you think about most abuse and assault are perpetrated by people known to the victim. It's really, really complicated, and that relationship plays to the complications of doubting the red flags and doubting what you think and feel, because, well, this can't be, it's this person.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, it's hard to reconcile in your brain. Someone wrote, I used to give the benefit of the doubt, but red flags are red for a reason.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because for me, like, there was a red flag every single day, I would think. And I think one thing was, when I first met his mom, she's like, well, why are you with my son? Like, but the way she asked it, this was like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you with him? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, get away. You know what I mean? And even, when I met his brother, it was the same thing. Like, why are you with him? Like, what's, I'm like, well, because, I understand, I was just making excuses. Like, I understand he's this way, but, there are some good sides to him, and yeah, those are like, those, yeah, that told me like everything I needed to know, I think. Yeah. And I think for me, um, with those experiences was because, like, how do I say this? Like with him, he was, I don't know if he was going through like an identity crisis kind of thing, or he was trying to find himself, but he would like get into a certain kind of show and want to dress like those people in that show, and then stuff like that. Cause like this is off topic. Cause when I met him, he was wearing like just like the Adidas like matching jacket with like the pants, and then he got into like Sons of Anarchy, so he wanted to dress like a biker, and then that's when that turned into him like wanting to like getting into like the skinhead stuff that I was telling you about. Like he was starting to watch movies like Neo Ned and like American History X, and he was wanting me to watch those, and I'm like, but those movies ended up turning out to be something like the people ended up switching like their mindsets. He's doing the exact opposite, you know, and then with him wanting to dress like that, and I'm like, well, you're with a black girl, like that doesn't. You're a black girl, and you think that way. Like for me, that I was confused, and I didn't know how to even talk to anybody about that because they probably wouldn't have believed me. They would have been like, what's going on, like, you know. Because I remember I was working in retail at the time, and I got a ride home from one of my managers and her husband, and they were black as well. And we were pulling up to the apartment building. He was outside, and they were like, "Oh my God!" Like they're like, "Wait, don't leave," because that guy looks like a skinhead. And I look, and it's him, and I was so embarrassed because I didn't want them to know that was my boyfriend. They're like, we'll wait for you until he goes inside because he looks scary, and he does look scary, but in reality, he's not, but he just looks that way. But like in that moment, I was like ashamed, and I didn't know how to like even process that. You know what I
I
mean?
can't imagine being in that situation.
Yeah, it's weird, and it's kind of like how I said, like, do you ever like hear yourself telling your story? You're just thinking like, like how did that even like, like how did you even get through that? And I think, and I
Yeah.
think that's one thing. Yeah, it's crazy. Like the things that you've experienced, you think back on it and you look back on it, you're just like, how did it even you're like what, who, what, when, where, how? Like how does that even happen? And so obviously when I showed you, I like now he's trying to cover up those tattoos and all that kind of stuff to, I guess, try to erase everything, and like I was saying, like the person that he's with now looks very much like me, and that was weird, like how, because for a person to point out certain insecurities or certain aspects about you, and then they still go for those things that they don't like. You know what I mean? So I think that was another thing that kind of made me feel, how do you say, feel, I guess like feel negatively about myself, was because it's like, so this person looks like me, but what's the difference? You know what I mean? Like what makes the other person more worthy than me, if that makes sense.
I think it makes so much sense, and I hear you, and I think what you're saying is valid. And I also want to offer that I think it's one of those things we get in our head about things. But for me, and I don't want to speak for other people, but it's nothing about you.
Yeah,
You are
exactly.
amazing and brilliant and beautiful. It's all about him and the hate and dysregulation that he has in him.
Hmm.
And he, it can be so painful and challenging and bring up so many more questions to see those pictures and to find out that information and
Hmm.
to kind of go down that rabbit hole. But it is personal as it feels. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Sadly, I don't even think it even has anything to do with the new woman that he's
No,
with.
it's definitely not.
It has everything to do with the work he needs to
Yeah.
do for himself. And I, um, another thing that we were talking about yesterday that this also kind of made me think about was how often the negative things we say to ourselves, we didn't just pull them out of thin air. We
Exactly.
heard them from other people. Maybe it was something we heard growing up, or maybe we heard in relationships.
Hmm.
But, those harsh thoughts that we have in our heads, they're untrue thoughts that other people told us.
Hmm.
And so that's why, again, how we talk to ourselves matters. The relationship we have with ourselves matters,
Hmm.
is talking to ourselves honestly, and speaking over those other voices.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I think it's important to kind of like, replace those negative thoughts with like positive affirmations. I think like, I think it's for me, it's like learning to like forgive yourself for those things that you blame yourself for. And I mean, I don't even, and possibly maybe even forgiving other people, but I mean, that's just, it just depends on the person and and their situation. Because it's like, yeah, forgiving a person, like you say, forgiving a person is for yourself, and I feel like at the same time, I feel like you shouldn't feel obligated to forgive somebody. But at the same time, I think it's one of those tough things, and I think just like it's important to kind of create that time to like practice self care and like self love, and just try to find like okay like because for me like I've been kind of like trying to like ask myself certain questions to kind of try to figure things out. Like one thing I just like I think maybe just like yesterday I kind of like asked like what will it take for me to like love myself again? Like, what is it that has to happen for me to get to that point? Because there's something, but it's the trying to figure out exactly what it is. You know what I mean? Like, what will it take for me to get to that point? Or like what matters to me the most? Or you know, like what do I need right now that's gonna like make me feel whole again? More than anything else. And I think that's that's like the most important thing I think to try to work through that. And I think that will kind of allow other things to to fall into place. Yeah.
It's really powerful.
Yeah.
Um, may I ask if you have any thoughts on that? It's like, I don't think it's something that obviously like you have an answer to in a second, but are there any resonations with yourself that you feel comfortable sharing based on, since you've asked yourself that question?
For me, it's like for me, I think it's more so of me kind of trying to get some of my old self back, like who I was before. Because every day, like I look at pictures of myself, like when I was like basically 19 and before, because I met him when I was 19, and basically before I try to like remember those positive moments, even though I don't recognize that person. But I guess like for me, I'm trying to continue or to get back things that I lost or that I put on hold at that time. Like one of the things was going back to school, um, which is what I started back in October because when I was in that relationship, I was in school, but I ended up failing all four of my classes like that last semester because I was going to school, but I wasn't going to my classes. Like I would just be on campus just to be by myself, and that obviously it was too late for me to drop classes and all that kind of stuff. So one thing was me like going back to school, and another thing was because one of the things that it's like how do you say when you don't like someone points out certain things about your body or just about your physical features, and you realize you didn't have a problem with it until they pointed it out. So I think that's another thing that I'm working on because for him it was always like a weight related thing, and I wasn't like big like at that time, but like what I was what people want to look like now, and so I think for me like I'm trying to get to the point where I'm learning to like love who I am now so I can get back to where I was, if that makes sense, like as far as like physical goes, because that's another reason why I wanted to talk about this was because I kind of allowed it to affect me for 6 years. So and during that time it was a lot of like emotional eating or just not doing certain things. So and obviously I gained a lot of weight because of that. Like 100 pounds, like a lot, because of wanting to me not wanting to acknowledge that pain, acknowledge those experiences. And I think that's kind of where I'm at now because it's like, well, look at you now. Like, you got yourself to the point because you chose not to, you know, to acknowledge those things. So now that I am acknowledging, it's kind of allowing me to get myself back to doing, other things. So I feel like when I get to that point, like as far as physical, I think that would be another. I think for me that would make me feel better. Like that's just for me personally, because it's always been like the physical things that happen. The physical, um, the how do you say it? It's always been like what everything he said had always to do with like it's always been a physical thing, even like about my hair, because a lot of people aren't aware of like hair like mine. So it's just like thinking about those negative comments and trying to keep speaking positive things about myself. And I guess like what I need right now is just positivity. Like that's I think that's all that I really need is at least at this moment just positivity and just me not giving up on what I'm trying to work towards. And that's like kind of why like with me creating like the pages because I didn't know what to do and I didn't know where to find it. So I wanted to find a way to create that. So I think that's the biggest thing is like speaking those positive words to yourself and even speaking it to other people to kind of help them, you know, figure that out with themselves is kind of something that I feel like that's helping me love myself more or to learn to love myself more because it makes me feel it feels good to be able to, to help other people, and yeah, but I think in a nutshell that's what it would probably take for me. And I think just for me, like, being a mom, that's been like my biggest motivation for everything. Because I don't want him to remember me as being somebody who's like, just sad or just like, So for him, it's for him because I want him to remember me as somebody who is positive and somebody who can fight through things that, fight through so many challenges and help other people you know, figure out how to find a way to help them fight through their challenges. So,
Well, that's, if I may, that's how I see you. And you're such a light to me and to so many others. I see it every day on Instagram.
I'm glad.
And I know we don't know each other that well, but I have seen how your son looks at you, and it is nothing but love and respect.
It
So.
is. Yeah, he's always, but he's not here right now, but he's trying to. He's trying to rush in here. He really is.
um,
But
oh,
I
it's
feel like you
great.
don't have to necessarily know somebody to be able to have like that kind of like connection with them. Because obviously I don't know you like, like, but there's something that there's like a friendship there. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to know somebody for years to be able to have that kind of like relationship.
I agree. And truthfully, one of the amazing things about this Instagram community is the friendships and the people that
Yes.
I've connected with. I feel closer in a lot of ways to people like you and other people than in my quote unquote, real everyday
Yeah,
life.
exactly.
And, we're creating these amazing communities and our own tribes of, people that, see us and that we see also. It's pretty
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah,
And
'cause it's nice to have people who just understood and who get you. Like you don't even have to like go into full detail. They're like, okay, I understand, or I know that exact feeling, or I have an idea of what you're talking about, and it's nice to not have like that judgment because because they have an idea of what it's like to have those feelings and have those emotions. And if it was just like regular life, they're kind of just like, okay, like, like get over it. Or they're just like, well, why don't you do this? I'm like, I want to trust me, I want to get over it. Like, I don't want, I just can't. Like, I try to, but there's always something, you know what I mean? It's always going to be in the back of your head, so it's nice to have those people to be there to remind you that, you're going to be okay and that, you know, like, your past, your trauma, it doesn't define you. Like it's something that it definitely changes like, your life, but it's not something that's going to like consume your life. that, or I think it shouldn't, because we all have so much to live for. We know we all have so much to achieve. We really do. We don't. My thing is like we don't have time to deal with other people's like negative, negativity. Because we're trying to find our own place in the world, and you know, feeding into other people's negativity doesn't do us any good. It really doesn't.
Wise words from a wise woman.
Yeah. I'm just, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a journey. I think, like I said, I think loving yourself kind of helps like remove that fear of like those past like doubts that you had about yourself. And I think, and once again, like with the self care, like I always say, self care is care for yourself. Like self care is all about yourself. And I think self care, like self care could be whatever you make it. Like even if it's just sitting here doing nothing, that's like for me, I do that sometimes because I need that. Like sometimes I need like that quiet time to myself just to think, because sometimes I get overwhelmed with like so many things going on or so many things that have happened, and sometimes you just need that. I mean, even if you're just like, I mean, even with self care, like for me, I listen to music a lot. Like I literally have a playlist for every single mood. Like if I'm sad, I have a playlist to help me not feel sad, or you know what I mean, like just a playlist to just help me feel, happy. It's literally there everywhere, like all kinds of playlists. I feel like music kind of helps you with that. Or at least for me, it does.
I love that you're finding those things. And someone wrote in, self-care is not selfish.
Nope, not at
Absolutely.
all.
Not at all. And it's a skill. It takes practice.
Yeah.
It takes practice, and it finds, I don't know, I feel like the media tells us that self-care is just like bubble baths. And
Hmm.
sure, that can be
Yeah.
self-care. But like you
Exactly.
said, sometimes self-care is just taking 5 minutes for yourself and
Hmm.
just sitting there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just staring at a blank wall for five
Exactly.
minutes.
That's me. That's me.
If that's
100%.
what you need.
That's me. See, and you need to get rid of anybody who thinks self care is selfish. I think that's another thing. Like people who don't support you and that kind of stuff, like they don't need to be around you,
Yeah.
because that's not helping. It's really not.
Yeah, people around you, as much as you can, try to surround yourself with people who want to support you and lift you up, and, respect that you matter and
Yeah.
that uh, what you want and need matters.
Yeah. That's true.
Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts? I know that Instagram will cut us off in, I think, 15 minutes. I think the time limit is an hour.
Hmm.
So just want to make sure if anyone does have any questions, I'll put them in the comments. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today,
Hmm.
Patrice. I'm trying to think if
I
there's
think.
anything else.
Or does anybody have like their own ways that they think help them like what advice would you give to somebody else who's trying to find ways to love themselves? If that
Oh,
makes
that's a
sense.
good question.
Yeah.
Chime in the comments. I know one thing for me that I'll add is sometimes it can be helpful because can be way harsher to ourselves that we would ever be to a friend or someone else in our life.
Hmm.
Say, what would I say to my friend right now? Or what would I say to this person? And chances are it's a lot kinder than what you're
Exactly.
saying to yourself right now. Um,
It's the taking your own advice is what's hard. It's like it's easy to give other people advice, but when you're saying it to yourself, you're like, no, you don't make any sense. Like you're wrong. So I think it's the learning to take your own advice, and that's something I'm learning to do.
yeah. And reminding yourself that you can trust yourself, and being easy with yourself as you're trying, because it is hard,
Hmm.
especially when someone has actively tried telling you opposite untrue things, and
Hmm.
remembering, no, those aren't true things, practicing, really practicing and getting better at being kinder to ourselves.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the biggest thing. I think that's something. It is definitely a challenge, but I think it's it's just so important to try to like to to practice doing that because it definitely it does affect everything else that goes on in your life.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it really, really, truly does. Um, well, I am really, really grateful for this time and that we got to catch up a bit and have this conversation. I know it was a lot of, on a personal level, that was really good reminders for me, especially because I was having a hard day and some of those not kind thoughts were creeping into
yeah.
my head earlier. And, working through them and just being here with you and everyone, it's really wonderful. Um, Oh, well, let's see. We did have one comment coming in. Hold on. Let's see. My husband helps me with my negative self-talk. He will point out how I am wrong or will ask me why I'm apologizing when I didn't do anything. I say sorry 50 times a day for nothing.
Wow,
Huh?
I need
Yep.
somebody like that. Yeah,
That's great. And I'm
I
glad
think
that you found someone who's supporting. Oh, sorry. Go on.
yeah. No, no, you said it perfectly. I think it's so cool for her to have someone who supports her in that kind of way, and someone who is there to remind her that like her feelings are valid and to not beat herself up for feeling the way that she feels. you know, and I think that's so cool that she has that a person like that in her life. Because a lot of us don't. And I think I think that's it's just so cool to have that. It really is. I think that definitely helps with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, And then someone else wrote, the betrayal is the hardest to overcome, but we need to but we need to remember that we weren't responsible for it.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's another thing is trying not to beat yourself up for that.
Yeah,
Cause like I said earlier, it's like you're trying to figure out what you could have done differently, and sometimes you can't control like what happened in the past. It's just about how you move forward from it and how you try to like figure out how to prevent it from happening again.
and ultimately, it is never, the abuser made a choice to abuse,
Yeah,
and it's not our fault. Thank you all for all the love and support coming in our way. Um, And someone will, one more comment. I like the saying, be the person you needed when you were younger. It helps treat myself better even when I didn't feel like it. But no, it's what anybody deserves.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Thank you all. Thank you again, Patrice.
Thank
If you're
you.
not already, go ahead and follow Patrice over at Survivors of Color. Um, And this is part of the Meet Too Many Voices and Friends for the
Yeah.
Community by the Community series. Thank you, Patrice.
Thank you. And I appreciate everybody for tuning in and interacting because I think that helps a lot because I love to be able to learn from other people and to take advice from other people because it really does help. You don't really realize it until you're in that moment and you're like, wow, that person really helped me and made me want to think about how I do things going forward. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Well said.
thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I hope we can do it again soon.
Definitely, yeah. Just let me know. I'll be available.
Bye. Thank you all. Have a good Saturday.
Bye.
Bye.